أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have talked a lot about strengthening our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and also increasing the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So many of these things come under ibadat, and that is one portion of our Islamic life. And there is another portion, another part of our Islamic life that is called mu'amalat. And we need to be aware of both these categories of our life. So many people are very good in ibadat, and sometimes we see they are not good in mu'amalat. And opposite is also true. Some people are very good in mu'amalat but not good in ibadat. So we have to keep a balance, and that's why I chose one topic which is very important. And many times, most of the issues we either cover in khutbahs or halaqas or khatiras, but we tend to neglect some of the very important topics. And this particular topic that I chose this time is Fiqh of Islamic Inheritance. Now, before I even start this topic, let me just tell you that this is a complete science in and of itself, right? And this can become very complicated. And this has a lot of issues that need to be talked about when we go into very difficult situations. But my purpose here is not to go into all those details. My purpose is to give you very generic and very basic information here. None of us are muftis or faqihs, and we are not there to give fatwas to people. But there are some basic knowledge that we should know. And sometimes we see people doing wrong things. If we have this basic knowledge, we can at least tell them that, look, brother or sister, what you're doing doesn't look correct. Why don't you go to a sheikh and ask for a fatwa? So at least you should have that much knowledge that what is right or what is closer to truth and what is not. So that's the main purpose here. Again, I'm going to cover very basic scenarios, and probably this will go 3-4 sessions, but inshallah, as we'll see, this is very important, especially this fiqh of Islamic inheritance. The place where we live in America, North America, it is very important that we learn this topic. And it might have not been that critical to discuss this in that detail if we were in other country or back home. But living in this country, there are very serious issues, and that's why I want to bring this up. And we will see what happens if you do not know the rulings of wills and inheritance, what complications can have, especially in this country, and I want to talk about that. If you look into this diagram, I want to be very clear from the very beginning itself. Many people get confused. There are two parts that I want you to be aware of. One is the wasiyah itself, and the other one is inheritance. We kind of combine when we say a will and testament. It's like includes everything, but I just split it out. And I want you to know the difference between these two. So what happens is, usually we talk about the wealth that a person leaves behind, right? When he dies, he leaves the wealth or any asset. This wealth, it's usually divided into two categories. One is what we call the wealth that needs to be distributed by what the person specifies in wasiyah. And the other thing is the inheritance shares. And now, we'll cover in a lot of detail what exactly the difference is, but just to give you a very high level understanding, inheritance here, this share of the wealth, this is actually defined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What we have in Quran and Hadith, all the shares, the percentages, the fractions, all come here. We do not have any say in it. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that wife needs to get 1/8 under this and this circumstances. That's it. You cannot change it. It's all fixed. So those are the rules set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. and Rasulullah ﷺ conveyed it to us, and we have to follow those rules. These are fixed rules. Nobody can change it, no government can change it, nothing. So all of us are obligated to follow this. Apart from that, our wealth, this can also be distributed by what we call the will, the bequest, or wasiyah. This one, we have a say. We can tell to whom our money should go. Like we can specify. Unlike inheritance, you cannot say, okay, I'll give twice the amount to my wife if I die. You cannot do that. In wasiyah, you have freedom. So we'll get into a lot of details, but wasiyah, its maximum is 1/3. You cannot go over 1/3. And this one, inheritance, you can either choose like whole all of your wealth, or you can minimum 2/3. You cannot go beyond 2/3. So 1/3 and 2/3 at the max, right? And people who are covered here in this part, inheritance, they cannot get part of this wasiyah. So if a wife is getting this portion, it's not possible for her to be part of this. Now this is very important, I believe, because especially for sisters, I want that you know these basic things, because I see, especially in back home in my country, I see a lot that sisters usually don't come to the masajid and don't learn these things, and what happens is people tend to take away their rights, right? So I have seen this with my own eyes, that sometimes in a family what happens is when a father dies, right, and the brothers and sisters, they live together, and brothers take care of the sisters, and and they raise them, and they help them get married. And what happens is when the time of division of inheritance comes, the brothers tell sisters that, hey, we took care of you, we spent so much money on you, now we don't want to give you inheritance because we already did so much for you. Now that's the problem. And usually women and sisters, they don't really have knowledge about these things, and they give up on these things. They say, well, what's there in money? But this is a very serious matter. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides something, we don't have a say. Even as a brother, you're obligated to take care of your sisters, but it doesn't mean that their share of inheritance goes away. That's not valid. It goes against the Sharia of Islam. The percentages and everything is fixed, as we will see with more concrete examples what happens. But I just want to emphasize that sisters should know these rulings, and they should fight for their rights. If they are not getting it, they can go to Islamic court, they can go to Imam, and they can say, my right is not being given to me. And if you see the same thing in your society, in your community, in your relatives, you should stand up. And because the thing here is that this particular wealth, actually it's a amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It does not belong to us. Allah gave us. We are trustees of this wealth. And that's why this wealth needs to be distributed according to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We cannot play with this. We have to be very careful what happens and how this needs to be distributed. So that's the beauty of Islam, basically, that Islam, it's unlike other religions. It's not just about worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's about, there is nothing in our life that Islam doesn't have a say about. Everything is covered in Islam. So even these wealth related issues, everything is covered in Quran and Ahadith. And this is, by the way, it is a religious issue. It's not something like outside of Islam. It is part of Islam. So studying this, inshallah, will give us rewards as well, because we are trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, understand its rulings. So the main purpose again of this learning, or the main purpose of inheritance and wasiyah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, basically, the purpose is He wants to remove any injustice or unfairness that happens. And we see that the number one thing that the fights happen in the community is why? Because of money, right? People fight over money. Some people say, this is my money, he's taking away my right, this and that. All these things happen because people don't know what the law says about them. Everybody thinks they are being oppressed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laid down very, very solid rules. He said that this thing needs to be given this way and that way. So that's why we need to study these rules, and the purpose is again to avoid unfairness and injustice. And also other thing of inheritance is that this is one of the ways Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to increase love between the relatives. So if you have an uncle and he is leaving behind money for you, and that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept that aspect, that because of this there is a bond that is developed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept it that way, and that relationship gets stronger that way, that increases love. So let's look into the details of these things, inshallah.